Welcome back to Giro3 YouTube channel. I finally got back onto the military rotator, the Winter C1518 rotator. I finally stripped the whole thing down to try and find what the problem was with it. There was several small things wrong, but basically as you can see now, you can see a better look of the actual. I'm not going to move it because this still weighs a heap here, so you can see the actual bronze worm wheel here. What I've also done is, these are the limit stops for the these massive micro switches. I actually had to remove the bottom one because actually it felt as though it was stripped. So I don't know what I'm going to do at that at the present moment. The top one is actually tapped through this and seems to be just touching the bronze gear. This one is not that crash hot as well, so I've got to try and figure out what I'm going to do with this. As I probably showed you before, when it was all together, I've done a bit more delving into this. This is a 5k potentiometer. It is a 10 turn. And and there's some information on the bottom. It doesn't tell you it's a 10 turn on here, but it says 10%, but it doesn't say 10 turn. But so basically that's that. I have, whoops, don't fall over. The actual gearbox assembly, I stripped it down, cleaned it up, and checked everything was okay. You may notice there's a bit of what looked to me like we had a lightning strike at this point here, and it's come straight through the back of the housing on it. This actually sits in here. It actually sits in there. It might have arced straight to the worm gear, because the worm gear is in the back of that, because it's like burnt. It's not like a so it's just like a burnt look. But everything seems to be good inside, and it's quite an interesting arrangement because, I'll grab this, the actual motor, if you look in here, the motor is hollow. The shaft, that's what this does, is this whole assembly, which has a bush in here. This is a worm drive as well in this motor. This assembly, see, watch this. This just disappears up inside the motor, and then you locate it. So basically, as I found before, when you rotate this one direction, this wants to force out. When it's going the other way, it wants to pull in because of the worm drive. So that's how that sits. So there's nothing else holding this motor. There's no bushes, no other bushes or anything. It's just basically the bushes that are there, and there's one set at the bottom, one set at the top, and it's worm drive, and it looks like it has a bit of Teflon at each end. So I've actually cleaned the commutator up, cleaned up everything in general. Everything's in good order, so I'm going to stick that back down there. And I actually looked up about these. This was obviously designed for something else. There's actually, the gear here has fingers going onto it, obviously for a counter or a pulse counter or something. So to get them out of the road, I just cut them off because they're not going to be used. So I'll put that back over here for now. But the actual, the magnet, having a good look at it now, this must be a rare earth magnet here, and it's magnetizing the steel, and so that goes around those there. I'm not going to put it anywhere near it because this is really strong, so basically that's what that looks like. So it's quite strong, so I'm going to sit that up out of the road. So what I've also completely stripped down the worm gear and the second or the last drive, and repacked all the bearings. There's actually double set here, so in here we have needle rollers in each end, and then in here we have some very small ball bearings in a cage at each end. That's the thrust one, and the needle rollers are the up and down or sideways. So it's actually got double the amount of bearings in this. So needle rollers as well as real small ball bearings within a cage. The ball bearings in the cage are just there. The needle rollers are within here. And also found out that you've got to settle the preload up. You want this to spin, but you don't want it to be knocking backwards and forwards. So you've got to find the happy medium, so it doesn't move, because you don't want it moving backwards and forwards. That means the whole thing will go clunk, clunk, clunk. So you've got to find the happy medium, and I already had it marked. So basically, it's all gone back together again. I've re-greased everything totally. So there's no look from this end. I even put more grease in this because where that had arced, or looked like it arced, it actually started to rust. So, but nowhere else was. So it's got a little notch here for a little part that goes into there. It's all solid cast aluminium, which I presume it's a cast, looks like a cast, and then they've actually milled it. You can see the milling lines on here to make it nice and flat, and you can see the milling lines on there. So yeah, it's all. Now we get this back over here again. It's not exactly light. Nothing's light in this thing. This gear is on a taper spline which goes into. Might have noticed that before. I had a taper spline, so that goes onto there. But to get it on and off, you've actually got to assemble it into here and with a nut, and then you've got to gradually push things together, and there's another nut holding it onto here. So it's a very interesting design. You've got to. Oh, there that magnet goes again. Let go. So I'll just put that aside, and there's the nut for it. So basically, now we're going to get into the thing that I had to do a lot of work on to try and salvage it. As if you looked at the previous video, the end of the this section here was snapped right off, and the actual motor had been floating backwards and forwards. Because as I said before, there's nothing holding these motors in position other than this. So it's an interesting design. Okay, this was made back in 1983 was the manufacture date. So what I've done is I've got the good old JB weld out, and I have cleaned everything up, and I have coated all around everywhere, and went round over the edges and round up into here, around the edges of here, to try and support these sections as much. Bolted up as much as I could. And then I basically cleaned it all up and dremelled it down and shaped it up and everything to try and get it in as good position as possible. I also made up a new little tongue for here. There's one brush sits just here, and somehow, I don't know how they were working it, they actually had a wire running in through here. It was floating in midair across here, and then there was nothing in here. It was like obviously someone repaired it or something at some stage and did a bodgy job or whatever. So I put a little bit of brass in here, and it's sort of held in with the JB weld at the present moment. So now the brush, which as you can see here, the brush wire will now reach to here. So this one's up in here, comes in from this, so that will actually reach now, where before had an extra bit of wire and it was just bodgy. So I don't know what was going on there. So basically everything's looking in good condition now. I have been seriously thinking about putting a strap across. Haven't figured out how I'm going to do that, because some silly bugger here, me, decided to put the terminal here. I was going to put it there, but it was not going to solve the problem with the lead coming off the brush, not going to reach. So I still may make a strap for here and make it come in. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, because I don't want this thing to break again, but I've got plenty of JB weld on here, and I have wrapped it right around as much as I can and reshaped it back up again. So, you know, it's not badly made. It's just that I think they just try to cut too much weight out of it. Obviously, with injection moulding, the less material you use, the cheaper it gets. So basically, I think they outdone themselves, and I think it could have been a lot. Look at the thickness of this section here. Really thin, and I've actually bolted up a little bit. This side here was a little bit bulkier, but I've actually bolted up even more. So I just think it was just how the motor was manufactured. It wasn't really designed, I would dare say, for a movement situation, where it's, you know, because this was what it was. This was a movement situation. It was, this whole rotator is designed to go into the field. be put into situations and then packed up and then transported to somewhere else and then put back together again. So the potential of something going wrong, I mean, this thing, if this motor sits in there, it's probably all fine if it's sitting this way because it's all supported by the shaft here. But if it gets sat that way and starts bouncing up and down the road, that's just going to snap the living daylights out of that again. It's just, that was a good idea, but not. So basically there you can see that's how it looks. And of course when I put it back together again, I'm going to have to do the preload on this with the little at the end there. So I just got to, but yeah, I've made these as big as I could, as small as I could, to try and get this all working the best I could. Put that way around so it doesn't fly around with the magnet. So quickly look at the PC board. It's basically a diode matrix, and the limit switches are quite clunky. They're a double spring inside. You probably can't see it, there's a double spring in there, and a little pivot lever arm. I have checked these and both these are working fine, so I am thinking now that the problem is definitely within the actual control unit itself. Oh, by the way, and there's four of these. Look, there's four of these bits of aluminium. They actually support the actual limit switches. So what else is there? I'm going to be rewiring most of this stuff here just to make it a bit more neat and tidy. And there's the cover. The cover still is in pretty good condition, so it's not damaged at all. So it's okay. And I showed you before. These are the bolts. These are the bolts for the. And as you notice, there's a bit of wire on that one. That must have gone a long time ago. Must have been an earthing wire or something. And then we got the little baby springs for the back of the brushes. Two of those. And the brushes themselves, there's two brushes. They've both about the same amount of wear on them. So they're about right. So all intents and purposes, this is going to be, you probably can see just over the side here, I've actually had the casing glass be blasted on the outside. I've etch primed it and painted in a sort of a similar colour as I could to match it up with. That's not exact, but it's all been cleaned out and whatnot, so that's been painted and ready to go. I've just got to figure out what I'm going to do with this now, because we have these strip screws in there and potentially a strip screw in here. This is it's only nipped up now at the present moment. I can't quite tighten anymore, so I'm going to have to see what I'm going to do with that at the present moment. But at least I've got this fixed now, and I can now move forward. So we shall see how we go, what we're going to do. We're probably going to do some upgrading and stuff, since now I've found out everything here seems to be in working order. The geometer's in working order, and which now puts the problem back onto the control unit, which I haven't really started to strip down yet. I may just replace it with another controller, DC controller, which means I can then redo things in here, bring them screaming into 2020 instead of 20 when it was manufactured in 1983. So, and probably a pretty good design for 1983 with the limited resources they had and everything. So, not knocking them. I'm just saying oh, by the way, they're still manufacturing similar things to this now to date. I have been in contact with the company in emails. So basically, I haven't got a lot of information out of them. Obviously, with German, communication is not that good, I suppose, or I'm asking too many questions and not getting much back anyway. Whatever. So at least I can move forward with this now, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. I know it's probably been over a year, probably even more, since I've done any work on this. Life got in the road and other things happening and whatnot, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, so I now bit the bullet and started doing things. So we shall see what it comes up with. Okay, we shall catch you in a later version. So this will technically be part 2 of this rotator. So we'll get into part 3 and what I'm going to do with this in the next video. So we shall catch you then. Bye.